Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Today we have the one, the only, the man with the voice, Peter Hedley. Welcome, Peter.
Hey there, how you doing?
Great. It seems to me like that accent might be from southern Saskatchewan.
Yeah, just right on the border of the states, actually. Yeah, that's right.
I figured. All right. Now, as someone who I guess is perceived as a leader in your place of work, it can obviously be challenging to discuss any issues of mental health, but Peter, you did it. So let's just dive in. In the book, you speak about a time where you felt absolutely overwhelmed at your desk. You froze essentially. You had a lot going on. Do you mind just sharing what was taking place that day?
Yeah, I mean, it was the back end of the winter, and I'm still, about 4 years in living in Saskatchewan with my family, and so it's still a pretty unnatural environment. I think it is for humans in general, but for me, I'd always lived in very rainy places, but not particularly cold places, and I think that takes its toll in its own way. But also, there'd been a lot going on at work, and there's always the sort of the budgetary concerns and a number of other things that have come up. And yeah, it was just a period where I recognized for a period of weeks where I was really struggling. And I think it all came to a head one day when I was sitting at my desk and I had the emails pinging in and my phone was ringing and all of these things that needed my attention. And I felt that I wasn't in a position to even answer the phone or respond to emails. And I remember thinking to myself, how do I make all of this stop without letting people down? And I think there's a huge piece in leadership where it's this need really a lot of the time to give other people confidence to know that you have all of your stuff together. And so, yeah, it was really a question for me about, well, where would I go from there? In terms of actually, meeting my own needs. And, I'm very lucky. I have a great boss at the university, and she really said, just whatever you need in terms of support. But I think I was recognizing that I was literally had a functional impairment, that I wasn't able to function at that time, and I needed some more meaningful support. And usually comes from a conversation with my wife to say, yeah, you know what, you actually do need some proper help. And I think desperate is perhaps too strong a word, but it wasn't far away from that. I knew that I really needed to talk to someone and get some advice.
Yeah, and so you essentially then took some time to work from home, I believe, right? And then you kind of hummed and hawed. How do you as a leader communicate what's really going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had talked to my boss, and I decided to take a few days to work from home. And I'm not advocating if people are really struggling, just yeah, work from home. It's fine because where are we all right now? But yeah, it was an important question for me. I think having that conversation with a counselor a couple of days afterwards was really valuable conversation, but also how I would communicate that, particularly to my own leadership team with three other people.
Mhm.
What would I tell them? And it was quite clear to me that I had the right to privacy, but also, there was a big sort of transparency and honesty piece, and trusting other people with that. So I sat after my kids had gone to bed, and I wrote an email to them explaining that I knew I was struggling, and that I really had compromised my own health and well-being by being as invested in my work and neglecting that side of myself. And so I wrote it, and it just sat there, and I couldn't hit send. And I was sort of thinking, am I whining? What's the tone? And if I send it, will they think less of me? And so there were so many different questions that I had, but also I wasn't saying to them, oh, you can leave work because I know it's hard for you, even though, that was a reality for me. And so yeah, I went round and round on this one, and finally just thought, you know what, I just trust this is going to be okay. And I hit send.
Yeah, and I mean, that in itself requires an enormous amount of vulnerability, but I love the fact that you just advocated for what you needed, and then you tried to go to sleep. And when you woke up, I believe that there was a response. What was that response?
Yeah, it was literally before I woke up at 7 o'clock. One of the members of my leadership team had written back and said, essentially, well, good for you. You give so much of yourself to the work, and it's important that you take care of yourself. And it was just such a relief, like more of a relief than I can explain, really, to say, okay, well, that's kind of what I hoped would happen, but I didn't know that would happen. And then the same thing happened with the other members of the leadership team when I spoke to them. And I think it was just such an important thing at the time for me to be vulnerable in ways that I hadn't before. And I
Yeah.
would probably say in my entire career, in many ways, I hadn't, and the risk that it involved. And so I think the relief was as a result of hoping that that would be the reaction, and then finding that was the reaction.
Well, Peter, do you think that sometimes we make it out to be a lot worse in our head? You know, when we get stuck in our head, we can spin it into all these different things, how it might be perceived. Like, are we our worst enemies in that situation often?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but I think depending on the industry you're working in, I'm very lucky to work in an industry where mental health literally is an important part of what we do. So I oversee, in broad terms, that side of things at the university.
Right.
So I realize I'm actually very fortunate. And so when I say I want to talk about mental health, well, I spend my whole career talking about it. So, but for sure, I think we can talk ourselves out of things because we worry about how we'll be perceived or what people will think of us. Certainly with the idea they'll think less of us. And actually, what ultimately ended up happening in my experience was that it was much more of a positive experience than I could have imagined, and was reflected upon as such. About a year after I sent the email, we were in a meeting with just a planning meeting with my team and a consultant, and she asked what we appreciated most about one another. And one of the things that came up was this email, that it was completely out of the blue. Colleagues saying, this was an important moment for us because it meant that we knew that you got it, you understood, but we also knew then that we could talk to you if things were difficult. We could talk to you if we needed some time off, and that you would understand. And so I think that surprised me and pleased me. I mean, in so many ways, obviously, but I think the risk that we take, particularly as men, but leaders in general, but particularly as men in those roles, that we have to be perceived in a certain way, that we can talk ourselves out of acknowledging things, getting the help that we need and deserve in a timely way, to not wait until things at such a critically bad point. And I think that's one of my learnings as well, to say when I notice these things creeping up on me now, and for sure at that point, at the end of winter, to actually engage and talk to people, and to get some professional help is such a critical piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Winters here in the prairies are are pretty rough, and I guess there's a reason, Peter, that you titled your story "Modeling the Way," because that's essentially what you do, and in my opinion, that's what a great leader does. And it was so cool for me when I first heard your story from you to hear about the ripple effect. And essentially, would you agree that when we, I guess, allow ourselves to be vulnerable, it tends to give other people permission to do the same?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I would claim any great leadership status. Thank you, but I appreciate appreciate the compliment. A bit of a work in progress, but yeah, I think the permission is a huge piece to say that this is the way it is for me, and this is what I want to see. And I think you absolutely do model that. And it was something that actually one of my leadership team, that those were her words actually,
Hmm.
how she saw it. So it's not even me describing myself, because it's a really egocentric thing to say, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Well, I mean,
Um,
it is what you did. Now, obviously, right now, amidst the COVID-19, there's so many challenges with mental health. And I know personally that there's a lot of leaders out there who are also really struggling to battle how they're doing, how their own well-being is, and trying to be effective. Do you have any tips or strategies, I guess, for leaders right now?
I mean, not from a place of great expertise, but I guess what I would say that works for me is when you're authentic with people about how things are going, and having meaningful conversations. It's often very, when you ask people how they're doing, there isn't that immediate response of, yeah, I'm fine.
Mm.
Because I think there's always a worry about, well, what does the answer to the opposite, look like? If I say, no, I'm not fine, well, what are they going to say? Nobody wants to hear that.
Right.
So but I think it's leaving space for the, no, I'm not doing okay. And I think it's focusing on the people, but also thinking in a broader sense. It's not just about the professional work that needs to get done. It's about, well, how long are we going to be doing this? What does the life look like? So do they have a house full of people, which is stressful in a different way, in a practical way? but also are they alone, in their environment, isolated for a number of weeks? And that's, very difficult in a different way. And so I think that it's trying to think about the whole person and their whole experience, but also leaving space for things to not be okay, but also not necessarily thinking that you as their boss or someone who works with them, you don't have to fix that. You just have to listen sometimes and be tuned into the fact they might be struggling. And sometimes I just find, a little bit of levity is good, keeping things light, finding ways to have fun. And one of the things that we've been talking about, in my teams is just making sure that there is that still. It can be a, particularly stressful experience, but where is the joy in the everyday? What are people doing to be well? Not foisting things upon people to say, you should do this. And if you follow these tips, which is why I don't want to say I have any tips, but I think it's just tuning into what people need, but also recognizing what's going on for you, and being able to share that with people as well in an honest way.
Peter, you're a humble man. You're a humble man. You say it well. And, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know that you are very busy. You have kids running around the house as well. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to share your story, to contribute to the book, and for the work that you continue to do around mental health.
Yeah, no, well, I appreciate that. No, it was a real gift to be involved in the book. I think it's a really critical time, and with the title of the book, it's time to talk. Yeah, absolutely it is. And I know you and I have talked about the fact that I ummed and ahed for a little while about would I participate. Until it suddenly occurred to me, well, hang on a second. If I decide not to, that's exactly the point, the thing you're trying to get at in the first place, because there's this stigma around saying, what would that mean for me? So, no, it was a real gift, and I appreciate everything we've been able to do together and continue to do. So, I thank you for everything you do too.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, Peter. You take good care, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, Al.
Bye-bye.